Okay, so this is going to be a theme for a while with me because I sense that there's something about this that is a useful endeavor, this idea of listening to some of these pure non-dual teachers and seeing if that can give us some sense of what happens for people who continue to remain in the state of being a person. You know, it's interesting. Because you know when you think about it, everything we've talked about in regard to these teachings is fundamentally based on the idea that there's no such thing as a person, is it not? Is that not what this has been about all along? I saw something before I came tonight on the internet that was a statement from a Buddhist Sangha that I followed at some point in the past, the Hollow Bones Rinzai Zen Sangha, and they had an advertisement on the internet about an upcoming weekend retreat, and the headline for the advertisement says, "If there is no self, then who cares?" So you see, and when I have, in my studies of Zen and listening to Zen teachings, the Zen teachings are founded on this basic realization of self-realization. So it runs through all of the teachings. It runs through all of the Zen teachings. It runs through the Advaita Vedanta teachings in Hinduism. It runs through Taoism. But these pure teachers are saying that if there is a teacher teaching this, that's not actual non-duality. Because if there's a teacher teaching this, then that implies that there's something to learn, and if there's something to learn, it implies that there's somebody to learn it, and if there's something to learn and somebody to learn it, it implies that there's something that is not yet complete, that needs to be completed. And these pure teachers say that that is not non-duality. And yet, what we have teachers like, you know, we've talked here about Rupert Spira's teachings, which he calls a direct approach. And in the direct approach, the primary realization, if you listen to his teachings, is that there is no separate self. It's the same teaching, right? It's the same teaching, but in these people who are claiming that non-duality is not a teaching, that non-duality is actually nothing, it can't be anything, because what is already true is already true. Therefore, nothing needs to happen. Even when people like Tony Parsons say, when he reflects on his quote-unquote awakening, he says it didn't happen. People ask him, you know, I mean, one of the things that people say to him in his questions and answers is, well, what happened for you? Was there a particular time? You know, students always ask teachers these questions. Was there a particular time when you had an awakening? And his answer is that there's a memory, right? There's a memory. What's happening is there's a memory of there was something that happened, but it didn't happen to anybody. It didn't happen to me. And when you look at that, you see there's a certain way of understanding what he's talking about, because basically what he's saying is when there is a recognition that there is no you, that there is no separate person, the recognition is a recognition that there never was a separate person. And if there was never was a separate person, how can there be a recognition that there wasn't a separate person? Do you see how it becomes something that the mind just can't get a handle on, you know? If what there is to realize is nothing, and the reason there's nothing to realize is because everything is already what it is, and that includes everything, there's nothing outside of it, right? Then it's already the case that you are what you are, and the case is that everything you thought was true about who you are is simply been what's happening. And the non-duality of it is that there's nothing outside of that. There's nothing outside of that. It's an illusion. There's been an illusion about there being a separate self. There is no time and no distance. That's not new to them. You know, that's not new. You know, quantum physicists agree that there's no such thing as time and there's no such thing as space. You know, there are a lot of different ways to talk about that and so forth. But yes, in the pure non-dual perspective, time and space are an appearance. So there's basically two things that are said in these pure non-dual teachings. One is that there is an illusion of a separate self, right? That doesn't exist. So that's one thing. The other thing is that there is an appearance of things happening, what's happening, and that appearance is nothing showing itself as something, nothing appearing as something. And in that nothing appearing as something is the body and the person, but that's just what's happening. It's not separate from what's happening. It didn't actually exist. It doesn't actually exist. So it goes back to what Paul Hederman says when he says, you don't have to get out of something you're not in. He's pointing to the reality of if you don't exist, right? If you don't exist, and that's recognized, and that is the reality that's being experienced, then there is nothing else to be said about it. It's over. It's truly what death is. Because that's the thing. The dilemma is the you that wants to recognize that you don't exist has it figured out that the way to recognize that is for the you that doesn't exist to recognize that. That's not going to go anywhere. Yes, it is the case that you can't, there's no way to express that. You can't even call it an experience because then you would have to be inferring that there's somebody to experience it. Right? So there's no way to express that other than to just say, all there is what's happening. And it is this is it, this is what it is. There's nothing outside of it. Nothing came before it, nothing comes after it. You know, when you talk about time, for example, and you talk about the beginning, in order for there to beginning, there would have to be a recognition of something that existed before whatever started, right? Which means there'd have to be a separate awareness that was aware of what was there before something began. When you really look closely at these things, you can see the circular logic. You can see that it doesn't really work. That's why with these people like, and you know, one of the things when I was listening to Tony Parsons today, these guys have a pretty big following all around the world. Pretty big following. And even though when you listen to those people who are part of that following interact with them, the interaction is this perplexing kickback constantly. Right? But the people who continue to follow them say, even though I don't succeed in saying these things when I ask questions, even though I don't succeed in saying these things in a way that makes sense given the feedback I'm getting, I still get what this is. According to these teachings, what human beings do is they create stories to explain things to themselves. And that's what religion is. That's what the whole idea of God is. It's a story that people use to explain things that they don't understand. And according to the pure non-dualist, there's nothing to understand. There is no purpose. There is no meaning. And what they're saying is if you just look, not as a person, but if you just recognize what's happening, it is obvious there's no meaning there. There is no purpose there. It's just what's happening. And that's not, and the way a lot of people react to that is they consider that a problem. What do you mean there's no meaning? What do you mean there's no purpose? But that may be real freedom, right? Real freedom. Nothing has to happen. Nothing has to be figured out. Nothing has to have an answer. Nothing has to... Well, you say it would be nice, but these people who are talking about this saying it isn't a matter of what it would be nice, it's a matter of that it is this way. And it's not even nice, it's just what's happening. Whatever it is just what's happening. You can imagine the freedom of it in terms of that there's nothing to figure out, there's no body to deal with anything anymore. It's simply what's happening. It's just what's happening. Obviously, it's possible for this recognition to manifest in a person. Right? Now, but look at what I just said. To manifest in a person. So there's no way you can get to it. You can't get to it because there's nothing to get to. It can't manifest in a person because a person is part of what's happening that shows up. It's not separate from what's happening. Now, I'm not indicating that there's a benefit because you're less emotionally attached to what's happening. The benefit is that there's nobody to be attached to what's happening. There's nobody to... And that's what's meant when they say there's no value in this. There's no benefit in this because who would benefit? Who would benefit? Well, it's not that you're supposed to see all this as one big appearance things. What's being said is that that's what's happening. That this is an appearance. Yeah, well, but it's not a viewpoint about life because who would have the viewpoint? No, you never had it. See, that's the thing. See, that's the hook here. The mind keeps playing this back and adds you to the story again, right? So you have to lose your consciousness? No, you never had a consciousness. Miracles are just a story about what's happening. When you look at it this way, it's just a story about what's happening. There is no miracles, there's just what's happening. It actually, you hit the nail on the head, Bob. The simplicity of it, and this is one of the things I've said about these teachings, right? The simplicity of it is beyond imagination. It's so simple that the mind cannot grasp it. Cannot grasp it. It can be recognized, but it cannot be grasped by the mind. Cannot be grasped by the mind. Yeah, and even now, what's happening is a story. When you tell people about things that happen, that's a story that you're telling people, right? But that's just what's happening. There is no real story. The story could be any story. Stories are stories. They're made up. All right. Well, we'll be talking more about this because I think there's value here. I think that one of the things that can be had out of recognizing what this is pointing to is that the hitch that people get stuck in is thinking that there's ever going to be a way that you could talk about this, there's ever going to be a way that you could experience this that's going to be your having gotten somewhere. Do you see what I'm saying? This way of talking about this that just wipes all that away. Just says that none of that is of any use at all. All right, so we'll pick this conversation up next time.